In 1914, the empires of Europe stood bound by suspicion and rivalry.
On June 28 in Sarajevo, the assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand set events in motion across Europe.
Across Europe, tensions deepened as words carried the weight of war. And so, war began, with Austrian guns pounding Belgrade.
The Russian Tsar, bound by honor to Serbia, ordered his vast armies to mobilize.
Germany faced a moment of decision and chose its course. Across Europe, the stations grew busy. Journeys began toward an uncertain future. France answered the call, her armies marching in pride and peril. At Liège, Belgium's small army stood in defiance. Britain sent its message to Berlin, Afghan, withdraw from Belgium or war would follow. The British message arrived, but no reply came. Time moved on, and war became certain. A British expeditionary force crossed the Channel to France. France struck first at the frontier, but soon fell back in retreat. At Mons, Britain's small army faced the oncoming tide, holding firm, then stepping back into the shadows.
By September, German armies closed on Paris itself.
At the Marne, desperate allies struck back, halting the German advance. The advance was halted, the armies turned back, and Paris was spared. Both armies dug deep, turning open fields into a web of earthworks. Both sides surged north, seeking to turn the other's flank before the ocean stopped them. At Ypres, the Allies held on, at dreadful cost. Trench warfare had begun. At Heligoland Bight, Britain's navy drew first blood at sea. The submarine torpedo changed naval warfare forever.
Russia surged into East Prussia, vast armies on the move.
At Tannenberg, the Eastern Front shifted, a Russian army was surrounded, and the balance of war in the east was changed.
In the Balkan hills, Serbia stood its ground. The Battle of Psea marked the first victory of the war. The Ottoman Empire entered the war, striking Russia on the Black Sea. Far from Europe, the war reached the colonies. From Togoland to East Africa, the struggle spread across continents. In Asia, Japan honored its pact, seizing Germany's base at Tsingtao. Off Coronel, the Pacific became a battleground. The Royal Navy suffered its first defeat in generations. In the South Atlantic, the balance was restored. The Royal Navy struck back and cleared the seas. In Mesopotamia, the port of Basra fell, securing the river and the vital lifeline of oil. Against all odds, Serbia struck back and reclaimed Belgrade. For the first time in centuries, war touched the English coast, and fear spread inland. France attacked again. Gains were few, losses immense. In the Caucasus, it was winter, not battle, that decided the fate of thousands. On Christmas Eve, for a moment, the war gave way to something far older, the shared quiet of peace. Germany unleashed Zeppelins, bombing Britain from the sky for the first time. At Dogger Bank, the Royal Navy turned the tide at sea, striking a decisive blow against the German fleet. Britain imposed a naval blockade, controlling the sea lanes and tightening the flow of goods into Germany.
Germany declared the waters around Britain a war zone, reshaping the conflict at sea.
At Neuve-Chapelle, courage met walls of fire.
At Ypres, a new horror arrived: poison gas on the battlefield.
On the shores of Gallipoli, the Allied landings began, under the watchful eyes of defenders above.
The campaign brought down heat. Disease and stalemate reigned.
In 1915, Armenians were uprooted and forced into exile, an event still remembered with sorrow. In Galicia, the tide turned west. Villages retaken, thousands laid down their arms.
The Lusitania went down within minutes. Over 1,000 lives lost.
America was outraged, though still unwilling to enter the war.
At Artois, the Allies struck hard, but advanced only yards at huge cost.
Above the trenches, air combat escalated. Germany's Fokkers ruled the skies.
Italy joined the Allies, striking along the Isonzo, but the mountains stood defiant.
Warsaw fell as Russia's armies pulled back in defeat. At Loos, gas led the attack, but victory never came. Serbia was crushed, her army and people forced into a desperate retreat. At Verdun, the storm began. Germany sought to break France's will.
Verdun became defiance itself. They shall not pass.
Brusilov's offensive shattered defenses, with hundreds of thousands captured.
Britain's War Minister, Lord Kitchener, was lost when Hem-S Mebshir struck a mine.
The Somme began with staggering losses, the darkest day in British military history.
New weapons appeared to tank, yet the slaughter dragged on for months. The Brusilov offensive ended, both sides shattered, never to recover fully. Romania's army was crushed, her capital occupied by the Central Powers.
At Caporetto, Italy's army broke, its line collapsing in the mist. In Russia, the Tsar fell. Revolutions swept the empire.
A provisional government promised to fight on, but the army melted away.
A coded message was intercepted and decoded, influencing the course of diplomacy.
In April 1917, America declared war, bringing vast power to the Allies. German U-boats sank ships in their hundreds. Britain starved. In the air, April 1917 was a massacre. German fighters ruled the skies.
After endless losses, French troops refused to attack.
At Messines, 19 mines tore the earth apart, one of history's largest explosions.
At Passchendaele, men drowned in mud as the battle dragged on.
After Caporetto, Italy reeled, her army shattered and bleeding.
In Russia, the Bolsheviks seized power, vowing to end the war.
At Brest-Litovsk, Russia signed a separate peace, ceding territory and leaving the war behind. Across the Atlantic came fresh strength. America's arrival lifted Allied hopes.
At Cantigny, American troops won their first victory in Europe. In Belleau Wood, U.S. Marines earned lasting fame.
In 1918, Germany launched its spring offensive. Swift and overwhelming.
The Allies reeled back. Germany stood on the brink of victory. At Amiens, the Allies struck back. 7 miles gained in one day. Ludendorff called it the Black Day. German morale collapsed.
In 100 days, the Allies pushed forward, breaking the stalemate and forcing a German retreat.
Bulgaria broke first. Her armor collapsed in the Balkans.
At Megiddo, the Ottoman lines broke. Palestine and Syria passed to Allied control.
At Vittorio Veneto, Austria-Hungary disintegrated, its empire in ruins.
At Kiel, the sailors refused to sail, raising red flags that signaled revolt and a coming revolution.
In late 1918, Berlin witnessed a change of leadership, and a new government was announced.
On November 11th, at the 11th hour, the armistice was signed, silencing the guns across Europe.
At the 11th hour, on the 11th day, the guns at last fell silent.
In January 1919, world leaders gathered at Versailles to decide the shape of the peace to come.
But visions diverged between Wilson's idealism and calls for retribution.
On June 28, 1919, the Treaty of Versailles was signed, marking the formal end of the war.
Empires vanished. New states emerged, their borders drawn in Versailles.
Yet the seeds of future conflict were sown, in Germany, in the Middle East, and beyond.
The Great War left behind a legacy of grief. Millions dead, millions more scarred.
Society changed. Women had stepped forward, reshaping the world left behind.
A League of Nations was born to prevent another catastrophe.
Old empires were gone, new nations rose. The world would never be the same again. The guns fell silent, but the echoes shaped a century.